Hi, this is CK at CK Education, and today I want to talk about the number 3 attribute of being what I call the perfect candidate. And again, if you haven't watched my first video on interviewing, then I recommend that you do that first. This is about 2 or 3 videos ago where I said, I think the title is How I Did It, 12 interviews and 12 job offers. Okay, so watch that first and then you'll see what I'm talking about. And the last couple of times I've been making videos on each of the characteristics or attributes of becoming the perfect candidate. And today, if I ask you the question, are you a teachable person? What would you say? Are you a teachable person? Or are you someone who always acts like you know everything? You know, someone trying to teach you something. Oh yeah, I know that. I got that. Yeah, I heard of that. There's people like this who don't want to be taught anything. You're not going to be very successful if you are not teachable. Teachable means that you are open to teaching. You're open to learning new things. And no matter how well you may have done in school, in college, it will have almost no bearing on how you do in your career. Okay, it's a separate thing. Being really good in school doesn't mean you're going to be really good in your career, or vice versa. So you got to reset. And every time you work for a new company, you almost have to reset. You got to learn new things. You have to learn new terminology. You have to learn new processes. You have to learn new management philosophies. You have to learn how to solve different kinds of problems in different ways. You're going to have new clients, right? You're going to have new colleagues. You're going to have new bosses. You're going to have different policies that you have to follow. If you're going from, let's say you work in the government and then you go to a private firm or vice versa, that might be a little bit different. If you're working as a permanent, full-time employee versus you're working as a contractor, the dynamics might be a little bit different. You're going from a very, very large company, like when I used to work for the Boeing company. In those days, I think probably still the numbers probably pretty similar, but in those days when I worked for the Boeing company, the Boeing company had 180,000 employees worldwide. Okay, and then I went to a company, Genie Industries, after the Boeing company, that I think had like 2,000 employees. Very different dynamic. Okay, and so you have to be able to learn new things. You have to be open to that. You got to be humble about that, and you have to be teachable. Now, I want to talk briefly about how this pertains to interviews. When you're going into an interview, and like I said, when I was a recruiter, I interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people. But one of the most important things I would look for is if I thought that this candidate was teachable. So there's different ways you can try to find that out. But when I talk about what are some of the, if the recruiter asks you, or I may ask a question, what are some things that you learned in your previous job? And if you say, well, I didn't really learn anything, okay, that's a bad sign. Okay, or if you have to think really, really long and hard about, what did I learn? That's not a good sign. Okay, you should immediately have a couple of things, at least 2 or 3 things that you learned. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a skill. Everybody thinks like, oh, I learned this program, or I learned how to operate this software. Those are not that important, okay? Because in any job, if you learn a later version of a certain software, that's not that impressive. But if you learn a new management skill, if you learn a new way of thinking about, if you learn a new process, if you learn how to improve a certain process, if you learn how to deal with people better, if you learn how to become a better leader, if you learned how to better create a work synergy with other employees so that you can get things done better, if you learn something about how to more effectively manage a project, okay, if you learn, for example, I didn't even know what root cause analysis was, but I learned how important that was, and you can talk a little bit in detail about that. Okay, if you learn how to do a Pareto analysis, let's just say, I'm just picking something, just out of the blue, easy. Then you say, well, I didn't know that was, again, I didn't know that was that important. But again, if you can say a few things about that in detail and why you thought it was important and what you learned, okay, that tells me you're teachable. If you can tell me a few things quickly about what you've learned. But if you say I've learned nothing, that's a bad sign. That's a red flag to me that maybe you're not a very teachable person. Because maybe you're going to come to our company, we're going to teach you some stuff, and then you're going to think, I didn't learn anything. I already knew everything. Okay, you don't want somebody like that. You want someone who's teachable. So in an interview, when you go in, make sure that you prepare yourself 2 or 3 things, very specific things that you can talk about in detail that you learned in previous jobs. Not necessarily in your most previous job, but definitely 1 or 2 from there. But it could be other jobs as well, other positions as well. But make sure that you have those prepared to talk about. Okay. Now, again, this is not a robotic interaction where someone asks you this and then you're going to answer this like a robot. It is becoming a teachable person. If you are not a teachable person, you're not going to be very successful. I made another video a while back called What is a White Belt Mentality? Like in martial arts, you start out with a white belt and then you get up to black belt, and there are belts in between. Well, I said, look, you always have to have a white belt mentality. You always have to work like, man, I can always learn something new. Even if you're a black belt, you say there's always something I can learn. Now, and here's another mistake. If you are a quote black belt, I'm talking metaphorically here, okay? But if you are really good at something, a lot of black belts think, well, I'm a black belt. There's nothing I can learn from a white belt. There's nothing I can learn from a blue belt or red belt or brown belt. Of course there is. Even if you're at a higher level of learning or you're very skilled in something, there's always things that you can learn from someone else who is less experienced. So you got to keep this open mind. You got to keep this white belt mentality about you all the time, okay? I had a friend who didn't graduate from college. And a long time ago, when we were in high school, he worked for IBM just as a really sort of low-level worker. He was just, back in those days, he was just repairing hardware, taking hard drives out, putting new hard drives in, upgrading hard drives, upgrading the RAM in a computer, things like that. Very, very basic things. So he would do that, and he was a very, very sincere, very honest, very diligent worker, just very serious about his job. And so they asked him, hey, would you like to be a supervisor? Would you like to try out for the supervisor position? And he said, I mean, I've never been a supervisor. I've never managed anyone. But if you could train me, I'd love to try out for that position. And I would do my best to be a good supervisor. So long story short, he did. He became a supervisor. After a few years. Hey, we have a management position open. Would you like to try out for that? Same thing happened. I don't know much about management at that level, but if you guys would train me, I'm eager to learn, and I will do my absolute best, and I'll try to be the best manager I can. Long story short, he did that, and he became a manager. And pretty soon, he became like an executive in that company, like a vice president. Remember, this is a guy who never graduated from college. He only went like 2 years of college, and then he quit. But he's an executive, and he quickly made 6 figures. This is back in the 90s. I mean, this is something like 250,000 or something like that back then. Okay, so but again, it's all because he had a lot of these attributes. He has a positive mental attitude. He had a very teachable heart and mindset, always willing to learn, never act like he knew everything. Even when he knew something well, he always had the attitude that I can learn and I can always learn from somebody. This is a teachable heart, and this is so very important when you go into an interview. Okay, so again, if the interviewer asks you about, do you know this or that, just be honest. If you don't, say, I don't. I haven't had the opportunity to learn that skill yet. But if you guys have training, I would be, more than happy to learn that, and I'll do my absolute best to master that skill. Or if they say, well, we don't really have that training, say, well, then that's something that I can learn, and I'm willing to learn on my own if I have to master that skill. But it shows that you have a teachable heart, and it's very, very important that you do, because that is a very important attribute, not just for interviewing, but for success in your career and life in general. Okay, there are many, many, many times throughout your career, no matter how good you get at what you do, where you'll have to have that teachable mindset and learn something. This is not a pride or an ego thing. You should always be willing to learn from somebody. This is so important. I don't understand when people, it's like a pride or ego thing. Like, well, I don't need to learn this. I don't need. Well, that's my friend. What is he? Does he think he's better than I am? And they don't want to learn from their friend. There's always these certain people they don't want to learn from. I say you even have to learn from your enemies. Okay, people who are your enemies, there's always something that you can learn from, even them. So you always have to sort of think of it like accumulating skills and accumulating knowledge. Who cares where it's from? Who cares who teaches you or whom you learn it from? If you can gain that knowledge and gain that skill and accumulate and increase your skill level, isn't it good for you? Who cares who you learn it from, right? So have that teachable, sort of that humility to always, be able to learn. I always say that I learn so much from my students as much as I hope they learn from me. Because I'm in education, most people think that, oh, you just teach all the time. I often say to people, I learn all the time. I mean, it may not be the things I teach, like I teach SAT and things like that, so kids might learn that from me, but I learn so many different things from my students. And so I always look forward to, meeting new students and learning from them and learning about them. And it's a constant learning experience. And I think that's what makes your job more interesting as well, if you have that kind of mindset. So I encourage you to have that, and it's very, very important for your interview to become the perfect candidate. So anyway, this is attribute number 3. So if you haven't watched the other ones, watch those. And on my channel, there are many, many other videos. I have right now over 100 videos, and I upload new videos every single day, at least one new video every single day. So if you want to learn about mindset for success, if you want career advice, money and personal finance advice, parenting advice, college prep advice for students, it's all on my channel. So again, I'm not doing this to promote anything. I'm not doing this to monetize or make money or increase my subscribers. That is not my goal. Okay, this is for those of you, those select few, whoever you are who is watching this. It is for you, and it is for you to be helped. And if you are helped, that's awesome. That's what it's all about. And so, but if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and I'll be happy to correspond with you. But otherwise, I hope you go watch these other videos and share them if you think they're helpful. Okay, so that more people can be helped, and that's the goal of it. That's my motivation. So thanks for sticking with me and watching this video up to this point. And until my next video, please stay well.